Hi, welcome back. Today's lesson is 1.6, composition of functions. Since functions convert the value of an input variable into the value of an output variable, it stands to reason that this output could then be used as an input to a second function. This process is known as composition of functions. In other words, combining the action or rules of two functions. So our little picture here shows a really good example of this. So you take an input, so that little ball at the top is our input, and you put that into one function, g, and whatever comes out, see how it comes out as a little square there? That comes out as a little square, but then goes into f and comes out as a multi-ball or something there. So basically what we can think about this as being one fluid motion. So the ball goes in, and then that multicolored ball comes out. So how do we talk about what this is? And we say there's two different notations here. We can say it's f of g of x, and that's how we talk about it. And this is how we write it, f of g of x. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put what we're looking for into the g of x, and then whatever comes out, we're going to place that into the f of x. And I know this sounds a little bit confusing, but when we do a few examples, you'll see how it's not so bad. Another way we can think about this is if you wanted to do it backwards, you can talk about your input of x at the bottom there. If you put your input of x into f, now this is opposite of what's going on top there. So the input of x goes into f, and then from f goes into g. And then what we're left with is whatever your y is. So this would be written on the bottom as g of f of x. Now that I've totally confused you, let's move on. Because we're going to look at some examples, and when we look at some examples, you'll see how things get a little bit clearer. So here in exercise 1, we have two functions given to us. We have f of x and we have g of x. Okay, so we have a little Christmas going on here, red and green. So A says, okay, so find the values for each of the following. So A says f of g of 1. So we're just evaluating here. So we're going to start with our g of 1 in the green. So basically what that means is we're going to take g of 1 and we're going to put 1 into our g of x and get 2 times 1 plus 3 is equal to 5. And now we're going to take our g of 1, which is 5, and now we're going to do f of 5. And f of 5 is going to be 5 squared minus 5 equals 25 minus 5 is 20. So f of g of 1 is equal to 20. Equals. All right. So kind of went into the b a little bit, so we're going to have to write a little smaller on this one. So b of 20, I'm sorry, f of g of 2 on b. So we're going to start with our f of 2. So we're going to put 2 into our f. We're going to evaluate just like we did with function notation. F of 2 is equal to 2 squared minus 5, which is 4 minus 5, which is equal to negative 1. Now we're going to take our negative 1 and plug that into our g. So we're going to have g of negative 1 is equal to g. 2 times negative 1 plus 3, which is negative 2 plus 3, which is equal to 1. So up in the top, g of f of 2 is equal to 1. All right, moving on to C. Remember, at any given time here, if you need to stop and pause and rewind this, do that. Okay, so now this one looks a little confusing. This says g of 0. So again, we're going to start with that g of 0 on the inside of those parentheses. And g of 0 is 2 times 0 plus 3, which is simply 3. Now we're going to take that 3 and we're going to put it back into g again. So now we're going to do g of 3, and we're going to do 2 times 3 plus 3 is 5 plus 3, which is equal to, I'm sorry, 6 plus 3, which is equal to 9. How are we doing so far? All right, give yourself a minute to write everything down, and let's get to D. Now, these are just different notation, but we can rewrite it. If this bothers you, we can rewrite this as f of g of negative 2. Personally, I like to do that because it kind of just reminds me that I have to do that g of negative 2 first. So g of negative 2, I'm going to pull those functions back into view. So g of negative 2 equals 2 times negative 2 plus 3, which is negative 4 plus 3, which is negative 1. And now we're going to take that negative 1 and substitute that into our f function. And beware here, because when you have negative 1 squared, put it in parentheses. Negative 1 squared minus 5 is going to be positive 1 minus 5, which is negative 4. Remember that if you do negative 1 without the parentheses and you do negative 1 squared and you put that into your calculator, whoops, sorry about that, guys, hold on. And you put that into your calculator, you're going to end up getting a negative 1 and not a positive 1. Because like I said, your calculator is going to do the order of operations, which is exponents first. So it's going to do that 1 squared, which is positive 1. Then it's going to multiply it by that negative out front, and it's going to yield a negative 1. So just make sure that whenever you're squaring something with negatives, you always put it in parentheses. Okay, so let's move on to E. And again, we're going to rewrite this as g of f of 3. So we remember that we have to do the f of 3 first. So f of 3 is equal to 3 squared minus 5, which is 9 minus 5, which is 4. And now we're going to take that 4 and we're going to place that into our g function. And we're going to get 2 times 4 plus 3, which is equal to 11. So we're rewriting this. So f of negative 1, we're going to start with the inside. F of negative 1, again, parentheses, negative 1 squared minus 5 becomes a positive 1 minus 5, which is a negative 4. Then we're going to take that negative 4, put it back into f, and we get f of negative 4 is equal to parentheses, negative 4 squared minus 5, which is 16 minus 5, which is 11. Whoops. It's amazing when I say something and write something different. All right. Okay, we're moving on to these bottom ones, which are going to be a little different because here we're actually taking the functions and we're going to place them inside other functions. So we're going to start with our f of x and we're going to place it into our g of x. And let's just remind ourselves what f of x and g of x are. Write them here at the bottom. F of x is equal to x squared minus 5. And g of x is equal to 2x plus 3. You have them visible on your sheet. I don't have them visible here on the smartboard. So we're going to start with f of x, and we're going to place f of x. So kind of think about, like, if you take the whole thing and you put it in parentheses and you place it where the x is in the g of x. So let's write down g of x first. So g of x equals 2x plus 3. And now we're going to take our f of x, which is x squared minus 5, and we're going to put it in where that x is. So we're going to rewrite that as 2 parentheses x squared minus 5 plus 3. All right, so we're going to simplify this to 2x squared minus 10 plus 3. We're going to combine like terms, which is 2x squared minus 7. Not so bad. All right, now we're going to do the same thing with the other side. We're going to start with our f of x, and our g of x we're going to place inside of it where the x is. So our g of x is 2x plus 3, and again we're going to use parentheses to separate them. So we're going to have parentheses 2x plus 3 squared minus 5. We're gonna multiply that out. I'm assuming you'll be able to do this pretty easily, but when you multiply 2x plus 3 times 2x plus 3, because that's what it means to square something, you're going to get so when you multiply this out, you get 4x squared plus 12x plus 9 minus 5. Combine the like terms to get our final answer of 4x squared plus 12x plus 4. Cool beans. I love this stuff. So take a minute, write down what you need to, rewind and watch it again if you need to, and then you can meet me at exercise 2. Exercise 3. Whoops, nope, it's exercise 2. Somewhere along the lines this file must be an old one. But anyway, exercise 2. The graphs below are of the functions y equals f of x and y equals g of x. Evaluate each of the following questions based on these two graphs. So here we go again with these graphs, and this is a little bit more complicated sometimes than doing it with the equations. You have to flip-flop back and forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at A where it says g of f of 2. So which one are we starting with? We're going to start with that f of 2 in the middle. So f is the left function. So when x is 2, y is 3. So now we're going to look at g of 3. Now we're going to go to the right function. When x is 3 on g, y is equal to 3. So our whole answer here is 3. I know it's a little confusing. Maybe if we look at a couple more, you'll get this. All right, so the next one, we have f of g of negative 1. So remember, we're going to start with the inside one. So we're going to look at g of negative 1. So that's on the right. So when x is negative 1, where does it cross the function? All the way down here at negative 5. So we have g of negative 1 is negative 5. So now let's look at f of negative 5. Now we go to the left-hand side. So we go to negative 5. And at negative 5, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like it's negative 1/2. All right, so moving on. C says g of 1 is equal to 3. Excuse me. Long day. Okay, so then we look at g of 3. We're on the same graph, no flipping over. And g of 3 is equal to 1, 2, 3, 3 as well. So the whole answer is equal to 3. Pull it up just a little bit just so we can still see our graphs. All right, so g of f of negative 2. Let's rewrite that. So we're going to start with f of negative 2, which is on the left side. When x is negative 2, y is 1. And now we're going to do g of 1. Now we flop to the right side there. G of 1 is equal to 3. So our whole answer is 3. Kind of fun, don't you think? I think these are fun. Anyway, let's move on. Rewrite it. F of g of 0 is g of 0 first. So now we are flipping over to the right side. And at g of 0, y is 0. When x is 0, y is 0. Now we're going to flip over to the left and look at f of 0. So when x is 0, y is 2. And the last one is f of 0. So the good news is we don't have to flip-flop back and forth. So we're going to start with f of 0. And f of 0, we found out from letter E, is 2. And now what's f of 2? F of 2, when x is 2, y is 3. So our whole answer is 3. All right. So hopefully the confusion is starting to leave you and you're getting a little more comfortable with these. We're going to move on to exercise 4 when you're ready. Exercise 4. Given the functions f of x equals 3x minus 2 and g of x equals 5x plus 4, both linear functions, determine formulas for the simplest y equals ax plus b form. So in this case, we're going to start with f of x, and we are going to embed the g of x inside of there. So I'm going to rewrite these. In color so it makes it a little bit easier to see. All right, so let's write down f of x, but where there's an x, we're going to put parentheses. See, so all we do is rewrite it and we put parentheses in there. But now what we're going to put in those parentheses is an x this time. It's going to be whatever we have for g of x. So the 5x plus 4 is going to go inside. And then we're simply just going to use our distributive property and we're going to simplify it. So 3 times 5 is 15x. And then 3, whoops, here we go. So we have 15x plus 12 minus 2. Combine like terms, and our final answer is 15x plus 10. Okay, moving on. The right-hand side. So we're going to do the same thing. Here we're starting with g of x. So we're going to write g of x, but instead of putting an x, I'm going to put a set of parentheses here. And wherever the parentheses go, I'm going to put f of x. So the 3x minus 2 goes on the inside. And then we're just going to multiply. So 15x minus 10 plus 4, simplify, 15x minus 6. See, I knew you'd think these were fun too. All right, last one, exercise 5. Actually, I think I'm off with my numbers, right? This is really exercise 4 for you guys. I'm sorry, I keep realizing that I'm off by 1. All right, so this is a multiple choice question, but remember that doesn't mean that it's a multiple guess. It does mean that you have to show a little bit of work. So let's go off to the side and we will start with our f of x, because this one we're embedding the g of x inside of it. So f of x equals x squared, and where there's the x, we're going to put parentheses, and we're going to put the g of x inside. All right, now, what does it mean when you square something? It means you multiply it twice. So x minus 5 times x minus 5. Sometimes you guys knew this as FOIL. Sometimes you knew it as double distributive. But basically, you're just going to do your loops and come out with x squared minus 10x plus 25. And there it is right there sitting at number 4. So like I said, at any given time, if you need to rewind this and look at it again, ask questions, whatever you need to. You need to write something in Google Classroom to maybe ask the whole class or just ask me. Feel free to do that. But we are going to spend some time going over this in class. I know it's a little confusing, so if you're not 100% on this, don't feel bad. You will get there. All right, so until we see each other again, always make good choices and be safe. Bye.